Platemark is a podcast about prints and the printmaking ecosystem. I'm your host, Ann Shafer. This is Series 2 of Platemark. We are doing History of Prints over here with me and Tru Ludwig. And today we've got a special bonus episode for you. We're going to do another one print episode. If you missed the last one, you should go back and listen to us talk about one print, Käthe Kollwitz's Battlefield. Today we're going to take a look at another print that has some deep meaning, Peter Milton's The Train from Munich from 1991. We're going to pull it apart like we did with the Kollwitz. We're going to look at composition, the story behind it, how Peter puts it together, and the history that he packs into every square inch of the print. We're also going to show you images of the copper plates, which we had the pleasure of working with when we did an exhibition at Johns Hopkins University's Evergreen Museum and Library back in 2016. In the show notes, you'll find a ton of images today, and a lot of them are bonus images. They don't directly correlate to points that we talk about in the dialogue, so they don't appear in the YouTube video, but they're in the show notes for you guys all to pore over, including lots of close-ups of the plates and the Mylar drawings that he uses, and all sorts of good stuff. So check that out. Okay, let's get rolling. True. It's been a while.
Such a while.
I'm so glad we're sitting down before you're heading off to woodcut boot camp with Hook.
Yeah, well, there is that.
The adventure of a lifetime. Jealous, I must say.
Well, we'll behave and we'll be like 12-year-old boys. So
baloney.
You're going to be so glad you're not there. She'd get weary of us in 5 seconds.
I probably would. And I would say to Tom, if you're listening, Tom, surely there's a subway in town.
Surely, Tom, there's a subway in town.
You have to feed me at regular intervals.
Maintaining Ann Shafer. It's a good job.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so we're here to do a things. But before we do, we need to do our...
positionality.
That's the thing.
All right.
I am a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her.
I am a gay white trans man, and I use the pronouns he, him.
All right. We're recording this at the Purple Crayon Press in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. All right, so
It's been 100 years, Ann.
It feels like it's been a long time. But
What was the last thing? What was the last thing we did? It was Hogarth.
Mm-hmm, Hogarth.
Oh, yeah. That was just around the election time. We've been in mourning. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're trying to get our history of prints muscles moving again. And by hook or by crook, we're going to do it. But we thought we would start with a warm-up, which is a one print episode, a bonus episode for all of you folks. And so we have selected another print that we believe is fairly perfect.
Pretty much the bee's knees, the pinnacle, the zenith of, even the zenith, if you will, of this artist's career, which is not to say that everything that took place after this print wasn't fantastic. But this one is just so chock-a-block full of context and meaning and personal voyage and love and despair. It's got all that and exquisite draftsmanship and incredible craftsmanship.
It is true.
All the ships.
It's got all the ships. Yeah. And the irony is, in prep for this, I listened back to our one print episode on Kollwitz, on Battlefield. And the thing about Battlefield that's so fascinating and wonderful is that it's just like this very simple, in the end, image of a person huddled over looking for, dead son.
It's amazingly simple.
It's amazingly
and
simple.
It's kind of like that. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. And it is just so elegant in its simplicity, but it is so difficult as well. Simple isn't easy, and holy cow, what she does with that. And this is the maximal version of making something as perfect as it can be. I mean, you would have to say this is a maximalist
This is
print.
definitely maximal, so we've gone to the other end of the spectrum. But it has many of the same themes, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
It seemed to be a good cousin to start back up with. We are going to talk today about Peter Milton's Train from Munich.
Train from Munich, which is plate 7 of his Interiors series. Ann and I feel as though that is pretty much a high water mark in his career as an etcher. That's not to say that after a certain point he stopped etching and started embracing the digital tradition.
He did.
And actually mastered it in incredible ways. He said, I took 6 months off to learn it. And here I am just still belly aching about having to use a computer to do my job,
Do you remember how many layers he was telling us are in the Photoshop files?
It was
230 or something.
Something absurd like that. And tink, 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 tink. It just...
Shoot me.
Yeah. But it's that same devotion to getting the image the way he needs it, and listeners, beloved listeners, you have to understand that Peter Milton is a fellow Aries. Was he born April 2nd?
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. Peter and I actually hit it off like champs. It was crazy. And actually, we probably need to give you a little preamble.
Yeah, we do.
About why he is so near and dear to our hearts. But,
true.
Well, let's just start there. So Anne was learning about Prince once upon a time. And it was 2013, matter of fact, and there was a talk. He was giving a talk at Jane Haslam Gallery down in D.C. With somebody else.
Another artist whose name I cannot remember.
Because, well, it was Peter Milton. And, of course, we went to see it. And so we're sitting...
And that's where we met Bob Benitez, our super fan.
Hi, super fan
Hey,
Bob. That's right.
Hello, Bob.
Hi, Bob. You're the bee's knees, too. So I take notes furiously when I'm attending anything. And so... I was taking many, many notes because it was exciting, and I'd always thought he was just astonishing because the completeness of the way that he renders an image is absolutely thrilling. And Anne had already fallen in love with him because we had discovered that we had we have 6 of the 7 of the interior cycle.
I think at that point...
Only 3,
the
right?
VMA only had 3, but one of them was one that we showed to the students constantly.
Which is Hotel Paradise Cafe.
Which we'll mention later, but yes.
It's part of the same series.
It is.
And the first time I'd ever encountered a Peter Milton print was when I was working as an art handler in Washington, D.C., and I was actually at Ernst & Young, and you walked into this accountant's office, and, we were hanging incredibly crappy corporate art, but I walked into this fellow's office, and I turned and went, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "It's a Peter Milton, and it's mine." And it was the Daylilies, as one that we used as the premiere piece in the start of our show of Peter Milton's plates. Well, this whole thing becomes an issue because at that talk, I was taking notes furiously, and at one point Peter said, "Well, by far the most beautiful thing I make are the plates." And of course, I wrote that down. And then the talk ended, and then there was the little convivial people talking with Peter Milton. And I sat down next to him, and I said, "So about these plates." And we sat there and went, and talked with each other. And eventually, Anne's like, basically told me to quit bogarting the Milton.
I don't believe I would have used that term.
Well, but it was that sense of it.
Well,
yeah, because...
You did monopolize them.
Well, hey, we were totally doing shop talk, and it was amazing. So we had this conversation, and I said, "Well, if you think they're the most beautiful things that you've ever made, why don't you exhibit it?" He said, "Well, I've tried to, but nobody's ever been able to do it." And I said, "Well, you should get somebody to do that." And eventually I said, "I think we should do that." And so it turned into a show that Anne and I put together with Peter's plates and the magnificent James Archer Abbott.
The magnificent Jim Abbott, yes.
Yes, of Evergreen Museum and Library, gave us our venue to exhibit Peter Milton's plates and some of the prints.
Yes, Jim was really generous. He let us do whatever we wanted. It was
absolutely.
great.
And then we got this fabulous catalog that we're incredibly proud of. And it's everything we ever dreamed of. And as you look at the images that Anne's going to post, you'll see that there's incredible photography. And that was Mr. Kirk that took those.
Yeah, Will Kirk.
Yeah. And,
shout out to Will.
Yeah. And then
because shooting copper plates is
it's absurdly
no
difficult.
Easy feat.
How do you just exhibit mirrors so that you can see them and all the details? And so figuring out how to exhibit these massive plates, some of them are 24 by 36,
they're big,
or even larger, and doing it at such an angle and lit in such a way that you could see all of the handwork that had been done on the plates and be able to get a sense of just how truly sculptural the surfaces of these plates are. And that was also because Richard Barbihan was just aces at helping us fabricate how all of this was exhibited.
It's true. He did a great job.
It was exquisite. And you can bet that people, especially MICA students, were just glued to these cases with all of these plates in them.
Yeah.
So the issue was that at first, we'd had the conversation, and then it was in 2014, a year later, Anne and I drove up to Francistown, New Hampshire, and we met with Peter and his wonderful wife, Edith, and had lunch. it was a blast, and learned the whole story about how Peter Milton had actually been going to Yale as a painter and then had gotten his degree and then was eventually teaching in Baltimore and living on Utah Street. He was teaching at Micah, a matter of fact. And he went to have his vision tested, and it turned out that he's colorblind. And that sort of changed his career, and he said, well, okay, fine. So he turned to printmaking. When we were looking at his garden, we were sitting there over our luncheon, and I said, your garden is lovely. He said, well, it's not so much a garden as it is what did he call it? It was like
patterns or something.
Yeah, so that's me, just to pattern and texture.
That's right.
Texture and pattern, because it wasn't about the colors of the blooms. It was the different shapes of the leaves and the different kinds of shadows that were held in all of these forms. And that's one of the reasons why being colorblind was not a tombstone, it was a stepping stone. And I think, going from being a painter of abstract expressionist stuff, probably all skewing towards the pink, to being a guy that does this exquisite work that brings to life in copper a vision that is all hand-drawn and all fantasy and all magnificence and all completely veristically drawn, even though it's wildly impossible at the same time, was something that we loved. So Anne and I had this conversation with Peter, and we got to go into his studio and so, and he goes, oh, there's the plate. And here's the plate for Train from Munich, just kind of leaning against the wall. And so the decision was made that we would get the plates and I would shine them up and we'd figure out a way to exhibit them. So we'd had this lovely afternoon, and it was the summer of 2014, and we drove away from Francistown with the freaking plate for Train from Munich in the back of Anne's Volvo, and we're going, do you know what we have in the back? We're like, oh my God,
terrifying.
It was amazing, and so it was just, we walked away with, the Holy Grail, and then I went up in the summer of 2015 and picked up the remainder of the plates and packaged them all up and brought them back down to Baltimore, and I had to remove steel facing off of 7 of them, and it was terrifying because I had to call up Bob Townsend and say, well, now what do I do to get this steel facing off of these copper plates? And he's, well, it's just a 3% solution of nitric acid, but you got to get it done in 60 seconds or you'll start etching the plate. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna destroy Peter Milton's plate. Well, all said and done, we stripped the plates and we got them all shined up, and being able to look at the plates up close and personal was a huge thrill, because you can see Peter literally in the plates as well, his hand and his visage in the plates. And so we're going to share some of that with you today, because it's just astonishing to be able to have the opportunity to see the plate and the initial drawing for it and then the ultimate print. So to us, it was the complete life cycle. And then eventually we had our exhibition and we had Arts Talk, and it was wonderful. And I won't say any more because Anne's giving me the look.
I'm not, God dang it.
You are too.
Well, no, I was just going to stop you to say that Bob Townsend is the printer. If he's from outside of Boston, and he's the only one that Peter trusts
to print his plates
because he likes the way he does it. Basically,
he gets all the nuance just right. He doesn't overwipe, doesn't underwipe. He's incredibly consistent. And, they can have the dialogue. If Peter needs to go back in and put in a little bit more dark in this area and that area, he'll do it. But
I interviewed Bob for the pod. I have not. It's probably not due out till November, maybe. Mm-hmm. Well, you won't. It'll be out by the time you hear this. Let's put it that way. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, he said that I'm gonna have to double check this. That he took a brayer and rolled on plate tone. I was like, what? Say what now?
Okay, well, that's all news to me.
I know. Well, I'll go back and find it in the tape.
Well, but, whatever magic he was doing to these plates.
They are beautiful.
But I can understand when you have the person that does it just right. And Anne knows that I'm very picky about Anne had the set of hands that I would allow to help me print 3 of my big prints. And,
my proudest moment.
Well, when a curator finally learns how to print a damn print, I think that's pretty cool. So, and Anne's very first print she ever printed was a 24 by 36 inch copper plate. So, let's just throw her in the deep end of the swimming pool, and you did real well.
Well,
but having that trust and knowing that it's going to be consistent is really everything. We're going to do the second in our erstwhile series of one print conversations, which I think is pretty exciting, because now and then it's okay to just talk about one image, and you could go on and on about it, and this is the one we're going to talk about today.
Well, so when we did the last one on Kollwitz's Battlefield, we talked a lot about the long looking and about your assignment to your students of the love letter and how they had to, or were required to go and look at something in a museum, spend an hour, draw it, and write something about it. And that's basically what we're doing verbally here. We're gonna
I have to write a 1,000-word essay.
because
A picture is
worth 1,000 words.
exactly, and so invariably, because they're the musicians at Peabody, they'll put the little word count at the end because
You're kidding.
oh hell yeah, of
Oh
course.
my goodness.
That's pretty cute.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's like, oh, this is 983. Sorry, you fail. You know, but no, the thing that will cause them to lose a letter grade is to not have done a sketch, because it's the sketching and the looking. You know, as Anne would say, the image rewards scrutiny.
That's right.
And when you have to sit with something and try and figure out why it's going this direction or that direction, you learn a lot about it. Now, I defy anyone to go and sit with this image, The Train from Munich by Peter Milton, sketch that up for a love letter, but hey, any one of you is completely welcome to give it a shot.
Well, and people did sketch little portions of things. Like
Yes.
it wasn't, you know.
Well, and you know, for the MICA students, they would do a passage, of course.
Yeah. All right. So Train for Munich is
A series, a cycle, if you will, of called Interiors, and he had been working on it from 1984 to 95. And that makes sense, you know, because if you look at how involved these images are, it makes perfect sense. And they weave together fantasy and memory and tragedy and music and love and longing and erstwhile kinds of hope, but it's always marvelous. They're kind of film noir also.
Yes, they're very filmic.
But even more delicately rendered than, you know, Sam Spade and
Sure.
And these prints all take place in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and the one we're talking about would have to be essentially post-war, or right in the thick of. I think it was 1939. Matter
Yeah,
of
it was
fact.
on the eve of.
Yeah, because well.
Eve for who?
Okay, so now when we talk about how do you want to go about this? Shall we talk about the subject matter first, and then we'll talk about the technique, and then we're going to talk about where it might go?
So let's back up. So when we did the Kollwitz episode, we decided to use Tru's very well done and highly honed 31 years worth of thinking sheet.
Excuse me,
34 years.
34,
Sorry, 34 years. And it's a sheet that says some things to consider when discussing a work of art, and it's supposed to be a guide for students who are doing this love letter assignment.
And many times these will be musicians. These will be let's just say they're non-art majors.
Right.
So it's the first chance to really go looking.
Right.
So to give them some signposts about where to go, this is what I've given them.
Yeah, so there's this great outline, and it covers on the sort of upper level atmosphere scale, subject matter, technique, movement, and composition. So we're going to run through everything in the same way we did with Kollwitz, just because I think it's interesting. They're so different. They're so the same and they're so different, you know? And I think it's going to be a worthwhile exercise.
Well, but so are we going to explain how we found the Kollwitz to be the succinct simplicity of what's being rendered there devastating, and this is maximal? With the Kollwitz, it's one figure, one woman working her way across a battlefield of bodies with one light source, which is a lantern she's holding to try and find her child. And it's all in the darkness. And it's actually incredibly simple, but very, very complex at the same time. With Milton, it's very complex all at the same time, period. I mean, there's everything in it. Even one might say the kitchen sink, the subject matter of The Train from Munich, it comes from so many different sources, and yet it all weaves together into this magical, magical image.
Well, and that's the thing about Milton and his work. When we met him, I was so grateful you were with me, because he would run intellectual circles around me, and you guys were off talking about, you know, the church in, I don't even, Bremerhaven or something. I was like, I don't even know how you know what church that is. You know, like, Jesus God, it's like this encyclopedic knowledge you guys had for architecture and time period, like all the stuff.
I know what it was. You got annoyed because he said, "Do you recognize that?" I said, "Is that from Hide and Seek by William Merritt
Chase?" I was like, "What the hell?"
It's like, well, it's because it is. That's all.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons that Peter and I got along so well too is just that I think we both take these little visual bites out of things and drag them around until they want to rub up against something else, and we put them in together. So it was thrilling, and also just the way he uses images, this is a person who is also a musician, and music plays very heavily in his artwork. By the way, he did study briefly with Nadia Boulanger.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm like, you what?
Yeah. I was like, who's that?
But there are these little leitmotifs, these little nuances, little nuggets. It's sort of like a earworm that'll work itself out in a print.
So he, on the Old Print Shop website, who is his dealer, who has all the plates that we used for that show now. I know, they're so beautiful.
Except I got to pet them.
Yeah, they were pretty cool. They include a quotation from Milton on the website that I think is useful for us today. So he writes, "I suppose what I'm really working toward is a four-dimensional articulation where images juggle with the time continuum as a part of the enigma. Narrative is only incidental to my imagery, which I recognize more and more often comes looking for me when I am out looking for something else. The generation of a coherent thematic structure very often begins with a series of sheer coincidences. Though my prints may appear carefully thought out and controlled, they are in fact also examples of a sort of aesthetic chaos theory, the seemingly orderly organization of actually random elements. I share in the contemporary fascination with randomness and in an almost mystical feeling that the very lack of a pattern is a pattern in itself." So it's almost though he has an idea, but as he's working it through and he gets these ideas of, let me pull in the facade of this, or the lighting from this place, or this character.
And then eventually...
And then it twists and morphs.
And morphs and morphs and morphs. And then what he'll do is a drawing on Mylar, when he uses what he calls sugar ink, and he has this peculiar technique that he uses of his own. And he'll do the drawing, and then eventually we'll get into that conversation about how it gets into the plate. But when you finally see the entire print, one of the things I remember the best about looking at his, because Peter and I have this ability to sort of love all the minutiae of things and then go sliding into naughtiness. And he said...
Well, and you talk in shorthand.
Well, so we're looking at this thing, and I said, wow, it's just so elegant. I said, it's just so complete. He goes, yes, well, I had to pass the stone.
Oh, geez.
And it was like, oh, yeah, I got it. Because you just stick with it until it's done. And we both laughed and laughed, because it is. It's an affliction, is what he would say, when you have this idea, and it's not done until it's done, until the fat lady sings,
Well, it reminds me of your tap history.
Well, yeah.
Actually, in a lot of ways, because there's a lot of elements that shouldn't necessarily work together, and then suddenly it all tells the story in this,
Yeah, it's a collage of these different things. So he's created this completely veristic, seemingly photographic, but completely impossible, magnificent tableau. And it's called Train from Munich. And the reason it's called The Train from Munich is because, go ahead, Anne, it's your turn.
He also writes about this on the website. There's a catalog raisonné of his prints online, petermilton.com, or maybe Peter Milton Prints. I'll double check.
I think it's petermilton.com.
But he writes notes about this particular work, and he talks about his wife Edith, and he talks about where it started. But essentially, the story is that.
Well, before we even tell you what the story is, maybe we should just pretend that we've never seen it before. Like we're students from, Peabody that had to go look at this incredible image on a wall. And the scale of this image, let's see, I would say it's essentially maybe 22 by 30.
It's big.
Well, it's at least that. It's a good size plate. And that's the other thing that's always lovely. His plates are never the size of anything standard.
Oh,
It's not 9 by 12 or 12 by 18 or anything like that. The image, the aspect ratio is what it has to be. So let's pretend that you have walked up to the wall and you see this image on the wall. What do you see in this very dark image?
Well, the interesting part about it is, we talked about this with the Kollwitz print as well, is where does your eye go first? And you would think that for this print, your eyes would go to those very white, bright doves first. But mine always goes inside the train station waiting room where those lights are coming at you. just on the right of center.
Oh, you mean the ones that look like little beady eyes that are coming right at you as though a train is going to come bursting through that plate glass window?
That's where I go.
With the shadow of the text that's floating over it from another window that's impossibly in front of it? Yeah, that.
That one, yeah. With the sort of fog misting out, too.
And, it's strange because I can't tell you where my eye goes first on this print because it's almost like I have strabismus. I'm just... It's just...
Well, it is.
It's just... You're jerked around because you're in a train station. It has all of the kind of activity going in it that you have to read it all at the same time. So yeah, I can see why your eyes would go there. But and even these beautiful white dove shapes, if you were to squint, and my students would say, "Oh yeah," well, I'll go, "Okay, now squint or soften your gaze," and I say, "Yeah, this is a squinter." The first thing you would see are these glorious white dove forms that are fluttering across the front. But if you start to focus more, it's just chock-a-block full of... You're obviously in some kind of a public space. There's a flight of steps coming up from the lower left-hand corner, and there's a woman that is ascending those steps into what must be the grand platform.
Concourse or something?
Of a train station. And there's a series of columns on the left, and then there's a kind of a waiting room and a flight of stairs that moves on up to the right and wraps around. And there's smoke coming within and without. And then you see that there's a gentleman that's looking at the staircase, but is he there or is he not there? Because the floor is coming through him. And then you look at other things, and things are floating in front of other things, even though it's as though there's a scrim of reality, and things come and go and come and go, kind of like Grand Hotel.
Yeah, the way he does that sort of transparent figure thing, I just don't understand how he does it.
And that's all pre-digital.
Right.
That's all hand-drawn. It's all pre-seen, It's astonishing how he builds these. It's so cinematic.
Well, so there's sort of four main characters that you gather immediately. The woman coming up the stairs from the lower left, the waiter person with his white gloves looking at the stairway to the right.
As though someone's coming down the steps, perhaps with an umbrella and a dog.
Right. And then I noticed the gentleman who's leaning against the pilaster there, who's also looking at the stairs. And then next to him, inside that little window, is a little girl staring out at us. Mm-hmm. And those are the sort of four main characters in my book who are actively, sort of...
But I always end up focusing on the old guy that's fallen asleep on the bench.
Do you?
Yeah,
interesting.
Because he's an anchor. He's a diagonal anchor.
Yeah.
So I get him because he parallels the diagonal of the steps.
Well, so the left third that Tru is talking about is the station opens up and you can see into where the tracks are, and there are a couple people who are sitting on benches there sleeping.
And yet there's also then the tracks behind with people waiting and watching the trains come in and go out. And then, of course, you've got these beautiful chandeliers. There are these globes of orbs that are hanging from the ceiling. And you also realize that there's some, neon letters, apparently, maybe, that say hotel. Mm-hmm. And then you also have the other letters in an arch over the archway, the Metropole.
Right.
And they're there and they're not there. It's as though you're looking through a plate glass window. How is this possible?
Also to the right, the Cafe Dante.
Exactly.
Naming this waiting room cafe that they're in.
Exactly. And so the fellow with the white gloves, well, who's he working for and why is he there? And then but dead center in this image is this marvelous window. And as you say, there's this sweet little girl's face looking right at us. And she's so darling, so winsome, and she gets your attention. There's no question. There's
also at least 4 dogs, maybe 5 dogs, which is always maybe more. Jesus, there's more inside the station waiting room, and some of them are very active. Some of them curiously have their ears up and watch other dogs, and then there's one that's totally asleep on the far left there, and it's almost like the dogs are representing different stages of an idea.
So all of this is happening simultaneously, and it's in this feast of gray tonalities. And this is a perfect opportunity to say that this is printed with one color of ink. But when I tell my students there's a world of color in black and white, that this is a symphony in every possible tonality.
Well, it is kind of cacophonous.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, that's why I say it. My eyes don't know where to go first.
Yeah.
And it's, because I'm in a busy train station. Well, so the subject matter is, what is it? It's a train station. We know that.
Yeah.
All right. With birds in it and dogs and people and staircases and letters hanging and dangling, and there must be sound because of the smoke that's in and out, and the puffing and
sounds of the trains.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So now what? That's our subject matter. We're in a train station. If you look even deeper into that window, there's a little girl looking at us, and then at a table further behind her, there's a gentleman who's also looking at us, who's substantially older than the little girl. Ultimately, you would find out that the little girl is Edith Milton, and the person that is looking at us is Peter, at a much different age in life. And this to me, this image is knowing eventually what we know about the subject matter. It just blows my doors off. I think this is a love letter itself. I think this image is a love letter to, as Edith would have said, well, you look at these things completely different. I was a refugee. So now, Anne, tell them what the scoop is on this whole train from Munich.
Yeah, so Edith, Peter's wife, who passed away not too long ago, a couple months ago, very sad. She was lovely.
And Peter, by the way, at this stage is 95 years old.
He's 95, yeah.
He was born in 1930.
Yeah. Edith is German by birth and was transported out of Munich on one of the
very last
Kinder transports that were taking young children and relocating them to Great Britain. So where these young kids were basically adopted for wartime.
So she and her sister, who was I think maybe 6 years older, they were both
they were together, thankfully.
Yeah, and they were taken in by this family and spent many years with them. And in fact, if you want to know more about it, you should read Edith's book called A Tiger in the Attic, which tells you the whole story, and it's delightful reading, absolutely delightful. So you got a young girl who is being taken away from her homeland and won't see her parents. And the way she's looking through the window at us it's very interesting. I don't want to say it's sad, but it is just really
a little resigned, maybe.
Yeah, just taking it in. I mean, it is.
And for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, just.
I mean, so poised, really.
Really, and and I would say that's an image of Peter, maybe in 40s, maybe, and it's fascinating to see that he decided to use both of them in these different stages of life. I think this whole image is a love letter to her experience, though.
Well, he says that basically. Well, I guess this is for Edith. I'm like, what do you mean you guess?
Well, because if you think about it, if you were to draw an X through the plate, essentially she's almost dead on center.
Right.
But it beautifully nestled into this window of 9 panels. It's magical. It's truly magical. All right, so it's this young girl who's being transported. That's why it's the train from Munich.
That's the centerpiece of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, what else do we know about the subject matter? Now, what we know is, because we eventually did our research, Anne, it's so delightful. Go ahead.
Well, the Kinder transports were 38, 39.
Mm-hmm. She was being saved.
She was being saved.
Mm-hmm.
We know that basically this is a whole story about the things to come, looking into the future and knowing bad shit's about to happen.
Because everything here is so elegant and lovely.
It is.
It's just hanging in this peculiar balance.
Yeah.
And the thing that's coming is this pair of eyes of this train that's coming straight for us, which you might not realize until later. But ultimately you realize it's this monstrous thing that's coming straight at you.
Yeah.
But it takes you time to get to that. To me, that's not where my eyes go first.
Funny.
But that's the thing that will get you ultimately, because if you think about it, they're on the horizon line where all the perspectival lines will ultimately go. It's really brilliant the way he's used the entire linear perspective way that he's concocted this image.
Well, and there's moments of potential chaos going on, but there primarily are these signs that people are just not paying attention.
Completely. It's not unlike now.
It is not
When you
unlike
think
now.
about all of the dreadful things that are going on, and just thinking, yeah, well, life goes on every day, la la la. Even though we're deporting people and stripping people of their rights and having to send people away, and people are losing their families, the more things change.
The more they stay the same.
And the only thing we learn from history is that we fail to learn from history.
Learn from history.
And it's still all here, It's really not at all unlike what we're experiencing now. It's just beautifully elegant in this 1930s trapping. Very elegant. Okay, go ahead.
Well, so the other thing you need to know about Peter is that, in general, nothing comes into the compositions by mistake.
Oh, no, there's nothing accidental.
No.
There's no filler ever. One of the things that you'll be excited to know about this is that when we did the exhibition, we were able to have the Mylar, the original drawing for this. And oh my God, you guys, this is so scary to move these things because it's sugar ink on Mylar. And the way he does it with this ink that you can lay it on, but you can also flick it off with like a toothpick. It's like the dust on butterfly wings because, if don't spill your coffee. Because it'd be
my
gone,
God.
right?
Oh,
so you've got
yikes.
the initial drawing, which is amazing. And then what we did in the catalog was you have the initial drawing, and you can see all of the thought processes, and that it's hazy and kind of lovely.
Well, and how complete it is.
Oh, complete.
Like he's, except for the doves.
And that's the thing. So he had this entire vision. You could see what it was all going to be. And then the Mylar gets exposed to a photosensitized plate. Now, it is still hand-drawn, but there is a photographic element to it. But once it's been exposed to a photosensitized plate, that plate is then dipped into acid, and the acid starts gnawing on the copper. And so the acid's going to do what the acid is supposed to do, which is eat away at copper. And it's not going to give a fig about what
where the lines are.
Yeah, and so it's
only
going
to a certain degree.
Yeah, and it'll change, and so it's, as he would say, it's kind of the great destroyer, And so it gives and it takes, it erodes, it gnaws away at things. So when it's done being exposed and bitten, he'll get the plate, and then he'll go back in, and he may darken certain areas by doing some engraving. He might do some more hand etching. The thing that's so interesting about this plate was that it was so dark that he decided he needed to lighten it up. Now, he'll go back in and burnish. Of course, the puffs of smoke are much lighter in the final print than in the haziness even of the original Mylar drawing.
Or the little lamp, the lights and the lamps and stuff. Yeah.
Everything in the original drawing, I would say, is essentially between like a 40% and a 60% value.
He also added, he wrote about this in his catalog, he thought the Cafe Dante sign was too much somehow, so that the smoke that wafts out over the porter's head and covers up part of the sign was also an addition.
Oh yeah, because he builds up the smoke. He really does beef up he burnishes away, scrapes away. But then it was the inclusion of these doves, and now think about it. This is on the eve of war. This young girl is being transported away because of impending war, and it's these doves that are wafting through this train station, which are extraordinarily beautiful and gleamingly white. And so that is this is where you start to understand that etchers are sculptors on a very level playing field, because that requires scraping away all of the information that was in the plate and digging down into the plate and then burnishing it all out so that there is no trace of what had been there.
Except in those spots where he's letting the stripes from the floor shine through. Now,
and reestablishing a little bit. That, and also integrating the edges so that the birds are kind of glowing. So nothing is pasted on. Everything is integrated in this most exquisite way. And the thing that you will get to see in the images is that we have a photograph of the plate, and then we also have details of that. And to see what the copper goes through to create the image is absolutely astonishing, because the gleam of how much it's positively magical that you can.
Well, and he tortured himself about integrating the edges of the burnishing, and
then he would go back in and reestablish some little dots and whatnot to get them to absolutely marry back into the plate. And I can tell you that having polished these with great love, my hands went over every single inch of this plate, and you can feel every textural shift. If you were blind and all you did was just use the softness of, let's say, your ring finger, because it's the most sensitive, and you were to use that as though you were reading this plate in Braille, I believe you would be able to read it. You would be able to sense where there's great light and the doves are, and then you would realize that you're moving into a much darker passage. The textures are all so fully developed, and that's what gives you this incredible tonal shift that he's created in this thing. It's just luminous. I don't understand. We were chop-fallen. It was just so glorious. And then to see the initial drawing and to see that the creativity never stops. It's not done until it's in the plate the way it needs to be. And it's actually, like I was saying, the value, if 0 is white and 100% is all black, the drawing itself is maybe only from maybe the 40, 50, 60% value. But in the final print, you've got 100% blacks, you got 90% blacks, you got 80s. The doves are 0. They're absolutely brilliant white, but it's so much darker than the original drawing. Mm-hmm. I'll bet you that when that first came out of the acid, I bet you he was gobsmacked. And I bet you he was like, it's
in
so
a
dark.
Good way or a bad way?
I think he's bright enough to know that at this stage, because he'd honed this, that it was going to do what it's going to have to do.
Right.
But what I tell my students when you're making a print is that you have this idea and you're going to tell the plate, this is what we're making. And it comes out of the acid and it says, well, this is what we're making. You go, damn. Or you go, okay. And then you figure out what your next attack will be. And what's your next campaign on this plate? What will you do differently? And there are things that in the initial drawing that you might not necessarily notice right off the bat, but in the final plate, there are things that he would refer to as, he has the thickest bevels on the edges of his plate. They're almost 1/4 of an inch wide. And yet he uses the bevels. The reason you bevel a copper plate is so that when it goes through the press, the blankets will be eased up and over the edge of the plate and back off. But he actually puts information into the bevels. So he particularly mentioned, I didn't want it to become a Milton mannerism, but we also have
it kind of is.
But it's, if you haven't looked at it.
I find it charming.
I don't think enough people have gotten to look at enough of it to think it's a problem. When you see her lovely hand that's going up the banisters, but it's actually dangling over the edge of the plate, that's brilliant. To see the where the train is heading towards us and those lines on the floor are extending into our space beyond the square of the plate, that's brilliant. To bring us into this top left corner or have the little bits of the chandelier go slightly outside of the box, that's brilliant. It's a completeness that you don't see anywhere else except maybe in Dürer.
So is the compositional goal to, you're breaking the plane, so you're disturbing the window mm-hmm. into which you're looking at a scene. Mm-hmm. So it brings you more fully into it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beckoning, What it does is it makes the print extend beyond the box that it lives in, for me.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And it's just, such a clever and lovely come thither. And it's one of those things that talk about rewarding scrutiny. It's like you need to know to look for it. And then all of a sudden you go, there, he said, that son of a, he did it there too. But you understand why he wins. And so, being able to see the completed print as well as the original drawing and the plate, I think is completely instructive. If we were able to see the original plate for Kollwitz's Battlefield, can you imagine how rugged that thing would be?
I wonder where it is.
Yeah, because the figures that are all submerged into the inky darkness,
right.
That's bitten so deeply into the plate.
Right.
And that's what I'm telling you on this. You can feel all of it. In fact, even on the detail of Edith's face that we have a photo of in the catalog, you can really see how worked that plate is. There is a ton of texture, even on this young girl's face, and it's sort of almost in a strange way kind of a halftone, but not, because they're not dots. They're these different kinds of marks.
But there's no line, really. It's
Yeah.
all different kinds of mark. It's almost like
textures.
engraving.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you go ahead. You can say it's almost like engraving.
I mean, a lot of it, he does go back in with a burin, so it is engraving. But it's how the reproductive printmakers would have these distinct patterns for satin and fur and whatever else.
In the hair, I mean, look at the way that they're those little, marvelous little wing-shaped V's that create the darkness of the hair. And you can sense more burnishing in the shoulder. And then the whites of her eyes. Look how beautifully complete her mouth is on this minuscule drawing. It's just...
I just noticed there's smoke coming over her forehead.
Absolutely. It's just magical. And then if you notice, there's a light shift in his figure too, that subdivides his hand and his wrist. It's this gameplay of light and shadow. It's just...
Well, his attention to every millimeter of the composition is, I think, unmatched.
That's honestly, there's so few artists that you would see that have this much attention to every detail. That's why when you look at a Dürer, when he quotes the Melancholia, that geometrical figure, it's the same kind of thing here.
Well, he's got Night, Death, and the Devil in this one.
Yeah.
The horse. So up in the upper right corner, above the wall along which the stairs run, in the right-hand corner, is the equestrian statue that Night, Death, and the Devil is based on, which is in Rome somewhere.
Bartolomeo Colleone.
That one.
It's in Venice. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, it's in Venice. See what I mean?
1488. Sorry.
It's from 1488. Did you know?
By Verrocchio.
And also, there are what look like maybe military procession with some banners coming along, which in his writing about this work, he meant to evoke the filmmaker for the Third Reich.
And then when you had mentioned in your writing how the figure, this unctuous figure that's watching figures come down the staircase with the white gloves, that's Marcel Duchamp. And as you look at the staircase, of course you're going to think about Nude Descending a Staircase. You can't see the figure, but it's implied, and there's a shadow of a figure coming down the staircase. So he uses all of art history as his panoply of, this smorgasbord of ideas that he can put together, because all of these dogs to me also feel like Cerberus in a way.
Yeah. The other art historical nod is the gentleman you see sleeping just towards the left of the waiting room with the bowler hat as a reference to Magritte. And I'm not sure, I can't remember why he chose Magritte as sort of a emblem of sleeping through the war, but maybe Magritte was that's like Matisse painting in the south of France and not worrying about anything.
And just making his peculiar, strange, surreal images and not thinking about what real life has to be. Now, you had mentioned in our essay about Raoul Wallenberg and also Otto Frank. So you want to go to town on that one for him?
Yeah. So the figure that's standing to the left of the window in which Edith is looking out at us, with his hands in his pocket with a German Shepherd at his feet, is Raoul Wallenberg, who was a Hungarian who saved several thousand Jews by hiding them, escorting them. I'm not sure what the story is. But I also read somewhere that he himself didn't survive the war. So a story I need to dig into more deeply. So if you all know the story, let me know. But that as an emblem of sort of...
bravery and sacrifice and the nobility of people to rise above evil.
Yeah, and also in the window, Edith is seated to the left and Peter himself is on the far right towards the back. There's a figure standing in between them in profile, and he writes based on the figure a photograph of Otto Frank and Frank's father. But, he always sort of hedges. Well, it's based on that, image. Well, yeah, but in this case, it's actually sitting, let's call it what it is.
But it makes perfect sense.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I think she died in 1944. And Edith could have been Anne Frank for all that. And Raoul Wallenberg, it's the same idea. Can you imagine being a family to take in two little Jewish girls from Munich and have them in your house? And it's so interesting to read her tale about how she lived through that and was separated from her mom. So, there's all of these dramas complete in this story, and yet you're just in kind of a train station that's so beautiful and so strange and so lovely.
And then in the train cars on the far left, there's three little kids who are watching like it's a spectacle, and one could imagine that these trains are taking Jews away, and they're watching it like it's a circus. train come to town or something. So there's that element also.
You're just the observers, is like what are people doing as students are being right now in our current time where students are being deported and just saying, well, that's just how it's going. It's just it's this kind of wake up, damn it. These are the things that are happening around you. So this is the epitome of brilliant drawing. And it's not copying photographs by any stretch because he's layering images. This isn't something you could even really do in Photoshop or Procreate or something like that. It's a complete marrying of things as though you're in a dream state where things are incongruous, but they're there, so they must be making sense. And I'm so excited for you folks to get to see the original drawing and then to see how it morphs into the final image and to be able to see what the plate has had to go through to become this image. So that we even have a little diagram where you can see how delicate his mark making is. I mean, in many cases, it's just stippling, just these tiniest little specks of ink on a piece of plastic. And let me tell you, moving that is terrifying.
Yeah. And they were slippery suckers.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So in our quest to follow along with our some things to consider when discussing a work of art, we've basically covered the subject matter pretty well. And we have, along the way, talked about technique. We haven't said anything about movement, style, era, or ism, which is an interesting problem with Milton, right?
Because it's betwixt and between. It's all things. It's photorealism. It's magic realism. It's surrealism. It's hyperrealism. What do you think?
I think it's all of those things, but the problem is that he's making these in a period of time when people are more interested in pop art and expressionism. Illustrative narrative work is at the very bottom of the pile. So if people overlook Milton constantly. I
called him a titan of American etching. And he said, well, we want to chart your trajectory. And he was, but, to get to be able to talk with him about what he did, and this is just one of his many images. If you were to look at all 7 from this cycle, I think you'd be thrilled. But you get to hear us rhapsodize about the one that we got to drive with 10 years ago. We drove away from his house with that
amazing
plate, and then I polished it up. And when you draw something or when you handle it, you really get to know it. And it's picking these things apart in those little nuggets that you start to realize there's not a damn thing in here that's accidental.
Not a thing.
It's so purposeful.
Well, and the other thing that was so remarkable about having the plates, just on your work table,
in my home,
accessible, was that you saw things in the plates that you never had seen in the prints. And vice versa, I'm sure.
And the other thing, it was because I polished them to a mirror sheen, you end up seeing yourself in them.
Well, we do have a lot of photographs of ourselves in the plates.
But it's at the same time, it's a self-reflection. I mean, it almost was the bizarre kind of meta version of how we experience art and finding pieces in it that completely hit us right in our own hearts. And this one, it just, even if you didn't know who that little girl was, the way she just looks out at the world, she reminded me, when I met Edith, there was something about a luminosity in her eyes that it reminded me very much of my grandmother. And I could just sense this little girl who is being thrown into this maelstrom of what the hell, but you have to be removed from home or you might perish. And you go through this magical transformation, and here it is magical. But when we know that behind all this beauty, there's such evil, absolute evil, and it's beautiful decay, So now we've talked about the technique, and we want you to realize that it is not just photographic. There's one aspect to it when the original drawing is burned into the plate, but then the fact is that he goes over every single inch of this and modifies it more. So it's really his very own kind of thing. I've never encountered anything else like it. It's not like photogravure. That's not even.
Totally. Well, it's just different.
It's not even the same thing because there's so much more texture that's in the plate here.
Yeah.
That, it's hard won. And then the ism we've talked about, he's everything.
He's outside of most of it.
Yeah, in much the same way that, go ahead and try and put Goya is Goya a Rococo artist?
Right.
Is he a Romantic artist? The answer is and it's just he's outside his time, but he is very of his time. And the only reason we know his time is because he existed.
Right.
And so that's our fantastic Miltonism. I just hope that he hears how much we love him. I miss him.
I know. Yeah, and then the last elements are the composition.
So we talk about line, shape, color, texture, space.
But we did. I mean, it's such an unusual composition in that it's all over everywhere at once.
It's a frieze, though, if you really think about it.
Suspended in time. It's cacophony, but silent.
Because here's the thing, it is cacophonous, but then if you look at the march of like bar lines across this image, the stabilizers, which is a column, another column, a pilaster, the frame of a window, another pilaster, the archway, there's the march of these verticals that give it a kind of a ceremonial kind of a time. It's as though you are in a procession, it is a frieze. And there's another thing about images that are this rich that, this thing, it could be, it's like a Callot print. It could be what we have here, 4 by 8 inches. It could also be 10 feet by 40 feet, and it would be believable because it's larger than itself. It's so full that I think inside your head, it could be any size it needs to be. And I feel as though this is one of those images you can absolutely walk through and into. Just even the coming up out of the basement,
Right, you can totally put yourself right there, coming up the stairs.
Like it's almost like you're on this escalator of time, You're wafting through, and then this cascade down the right-hand side, and then the way you're led up by these gleaming, glorious doves, that would be a piece that wouldn't come. It would be so hard won. And, at the end of it, 69 million people across the globe would be dead, And this is because we don't pay attention. Think about it. It only took, how long did it take Hitler to dismantle the whole thing? 53 days or something like that? The more things change, the more they stay the same, It's stay awake. And I think that's one of the things that he also puts in these. They're so lovely and so outside of our time, but they're all of these little things that are so dazzling and interesting. And that's why I find it fascinating, Anne, that for you, the train that's coming right at us, it's just headed right for us. That's almost a futurist thing, and you can hear it. And the way he's used the light around that, it gives it sound.
Well, and it's impossible. It wouldn't be coming up the track that way, right?
Not.
Like it's all wrong.
Completely. It's not.
Which makes it more terrifying.
Absolutely, because it could happen.
I mean, it's like one of my childhood nightmares.
Exactly. So we are wildly pleased by this, and so it's got all those good things. It's got light and shadow. It's got chiaroscuro to the zillionth degree. It's got a depth, a field, Everything is in focus in this. It's hazy, but it's also in focus. Everything is readable.
And that your last couple of things are the design principles, which include unity, rhythm, proportion, balance, emphasis, and variety, which I would say he's got all of.
Every last bit. I mean, there's variety. There's not one damn thing about this that's boring. But yeah, it's got variety, but it's unified, and it's not just because it's all dark.
Yeah.
And the way he directs our eye around, like even the metropole, the arch of letters, that brings us back down. It gives us a circle that circles those, the train eyes that are coming right at us. It keeps that eye moving. It's almost if you really think about it, it's almost a Möbius strip. If you look at how, we come up.
Oh, it connects with the circle of the doves.
Right. And then it comes up across there, and it goes up and over the puffs of smoke on the top left, and then you come back up into it with the lady coming up the steps. And then you're back into this. It's almost like an Escher.
Oh, yeah.
In that,
Oof.
Yeah. It's just almost like cinema verite. It's like the camera won't stop moving.
Right.
And that's, how do you do that? Well, he does it.
What I don't think we ever asked him about, and I'm not sure has been written somewhere, is Well, maybe you know how long it takes him to develop the composition like that. Like,
Oh, it'll take him months and months and months and months. It was fascinating because when we interviewed him, he was now making the digital versions. And so actually it gave you an opportunity to see him put something in, take something out, put it in, take it out, put it in,
with
take
a
it out.
click.
Yeah. And with the way he was drawing
You can
this,
see why you'd be attracted to that
absolutely,
mode, for
because
sure.
when I'm putting things, I'll use tracing paper and I'll do a rehearsal for it. And, with the way that he draws the things on there with the stippling, and then he can knock that stuff off with a stylus, he could draw it in and knock it out of there. So months and months and months and months, seriously. I mean, it's not, I just sat down and did this
Right.
one weekend. There's no way you could do that, I think it's interesting that it's on Mylar as well because of the way it's so strongly scaffolded. Because I've talked about the vertical stabilizers, but then you also look at how he's got the horizontal stabilizers and the way he's using the floor tiles, and he moves us back into space. And then we, have the window frames, and then we have the cornices and the skylights. Mathematically, it makes perfect sense.
I was trying to think if it's almost the most square of the compositions.
I think it is.
I mean, lots of them have verticals of architecture that help, but there's always like a swoop or something, except for daylilies, which stops you up short because of that mirror.
But it's so much closer. That's far closer to us than.
Right.
But you see, our depth of field on that one is, what are we, maybe 7 feet away from the guy that's standing in front of the mantle.
Right.
And then everything that's behind him is going back into the way back. But it's still not nearly as a deep space situation as is in the Train from Munich. Train from Munich sinks back into time and dumps forward into, it's almost Baroque in that sense. From the here to the hereafter. It's like it's seamless between the past and where you are. And I think in that regard, I mean, even, we've got all the other things like the points of departure and Nijinsky and all the others. This is the one that takes us the furthest deep and the furthest outside of it, I think, of almost anything. I polished a lot of plates. For instance, even if we talked about his 20th Century Limited or any of the others, they're glorious compositions, but this is the one that sinks so far in, even in Shithra. And I think we should probably let him see in the images, like the embarkation for Shithra. It goes back, but nothing goes as far deep into this thing. It's almost like going to the core of the earth, with those train eyes. It's
inspired.
It is. And I think it was devastating to us to see them. And we of course, we love them all. And I got to almost basically make love to all of those plates. I'm not kidding.
But I always, and I think I wrote in this essay that, to my mind, this is the most important work of his career. And it's not because compositionally it sings, which it does. I think for me, the importance is that a lot of the work is pretty much fantasy. I mean, there's elements in it that are drawn from the real world, but it doesn't attack a piece of history quite like this. And it also doesn't attack something so effing personal.
This is the thing. And that's why it's like, this is the only one that has...
This is like the heart of Peter's
because this
work.
is the only thing that has his wife in it, as far as we know.
I mean, the kids show up sometimes, Naomi and...
Yeah, but that's like with the kitty, Esme, their cat, and so on and so on. But this is Edith's story. And it's him observing from within and from without the story of what happened to Edith at this incredibly difficult time of history of her life.
Well, he's unable to help.
Yeah.
And he can't protect her. He can't.
Yeah, and he's literally sitting there. If you look at it, the way he's got his hand limply, it's like the only way he can help is in retrospect by making this image. And I think, and that is why it's a love letter.
And it's staking it in her history, along with her book, obviously. But it's a pure love.
Absolutely. Just watching them, even when I was, they were in their late 80s when I was working with them, just their banter and their care for each other. And it's that understanding about this moment in this young lady's life. It's almost proprietary. It's like he's protecting her from decades later.
I'm trying to think of other relationships I mean, surely there are many couples who have loved each other as deeply, but there's such care and respect, and
and just to have created this entire reality around this one little
just
face,
one moment.
one little face that's looking out at this big, weird, strange, scary world that's going to fall apart at any time. And honestly, when I'll have my students in class do, I say, put your hand over the doves, just cover them up. And that's one damn dark world. There's no release.
Yeah.
There's no way out. And if you think about what a stroke of absolute genius it was to completely eradicate what had been there and let that light of hope in there, that's the thing that there was an end ultimately, and at what cost. And honestly, just having the opportunity to realize just what that Mobius strip, it is almost like watching history repeat itself again and again. And it's this ping and pong and back and forth that, it's, and the sleep of reason produces monsters, this is telling us things that we need to be paying attention to right now.
Well, and the other thing that's kind of interesting that just struck me is I as we were recording this, I released an episode with Ellen Heck yesterday. And we were talking about how in Western language systems, looking right compositionally is looking to the future. And these guys are all looking at this cacophony that's about to come down the steps. But they're all focused that way except for little Edith, right? And Otto Frank.
And the guy that's completely asleep in the chair.
And the guy who's asleep on the job.
It's just...
It's kind of fascinating. It's like the tornado of shit is coming down those stairs. And he's just hinting. It's kind of fascinating that he doesn't have to show anything except for the
edge of an umbrella and a shadowy figure.
And a blind man's cane.
And a blind man's cane, the blind leading the blind kind of a thing.
Right.
And looking at the Mylar, it's really helpful to just think about this was all in there to begin with,
Yeah. Except for that cane's not there.
I think, no. And it's his repetition of that.
And the umbrella. Or maybe it's there sketched in.
No, it's not.
Fascinating.
You can't see it. And the Cafe Dante and look at the shadowy figure against the wall on the steps has become far more pronounced.
Yeah.
In terms of balancing it. Yeah, you can see the Bartolomeo.
And the aqueduct on the top right there. Oh, fascinating.
So, to see how much he has manipulated this even more. And that's the thing that's also so marvelous about printmaking is that it's so mutable. John Sparks, who was the founder of Mica's printmaking department back in the 70s, would say, where there's metal, there's hope. This print's not done until you've done everything to the plate that you possibly can. Because if you went with your original drawing, it's not the print.
No.
It's not. There's little Edith, there's Peter, but...
He gets at part of it, but not all of it.
Yeah, because there's so much more reality that he can pull forward. Look at even the smoke leaves a shadow on the wall. Yeah. And there's not nearly as much of that in the original drawing. It was though, and the drawing is so complete,
Right.
You could just happily own a drawing like that. But it's like practicing, it's like when you're playing a piece of music and it's not done until the decay of the sound. And I think
why the conductor is like, don't move an inch.
Yeah. And this is that moment where before the audience starts to applaud or bursts into tears, it's miraculous. I honestly adore how I'm left hovering in this.
Well, it gets me emotional, this one.
Absolutely. And the more we've talked about it, it's just, yeah. And God bless her. Edith was wonderful. If you read her book, it'll help shed some light about what happened with this little girl.
Well, and my hope for everybody is to help them look past what they might perceive as illustrative, narrative, too real, too this, that, too tight, and to really let the story and the atmosphere and all of it wash over you, because it's such a deep and thoughtful and loving work. Yeah.
Even if you didn't know the whole story, I think you know something big is going on.
Yeah.
You know there's an energy in there. You know, when you walk in a room and something terrible has happened, you don't know what it is. It's like pets in the house. No, something's up. But to know who these people are and how he's positioned them and how he's playing with time. I remember thinking at one point, it's kind of too bad that I'll never hear a Beethoven symphony for the first time ever again.
That's hilarious that you said that, because you said the same thing on the Kolvitz episode.
I did?
Yes.
You'll never see it again for the first time. But this is like a fireplace, it's...
You said that too.
But it is, Anne, it
That's
is.
hilarious. That's great.
But come on, it changes each time. I mean, I lavished over this. I touched every single square inch of that plate. And, discovering things. Of course, it's in reverse when it's on the plate. But that always... that looking at the plates just helped you let go of what you expected to be the next thing over, because it's on the other side, like it helps you restructure your thinking about it somehow. That's the thing. You always have to do something to your first idea. In art school, it's like you better come up with a second drawing and a third drawing and a fourth drawing. And this is a perfect example of that. For my printmaking class, they have to take one plate and they have to print it 5 completely different ways to give it a completely different appearance. That's the kind of thing here. It's like he will not let it stop until he's past that stone. And God bless him. I'm so pleased that we got to be a part of that voyage. And I look forward to you folks having the opportunity to experience this with us when it gets out there on the airwaves.
Yeah. Well, and also, if you've listened this far, you'll be happy to know that we do have hard copies of the catalog still if you're desperate for one. But there is a PDF of it online that's easily accessible, and I will include a link to it in our show notes.
And that's really pretty because the full color. Thank you, Jim.
Jim and Lisa Pupa was our designer. Yeah.
And the format of this thing is like the dimensions of it are of the plate, and it's everything about this was, we tried to honor his thinking and his design concepts in the way that this was laid out. And
I don't think we said that Evergreen, the museum and library, is part of the Johns Hopkins University. So we also have to nod to Winston Tabb, the dean of the division we were in.
I mean, we were so lucky. And didn't Sarah Levy help us out?
Sarah Levy did help us out with funding.
Yeah.
The lovely, fabulous Sarah Levy.
God, one of the coolest ladies. It's like, I want to grow up and be like her.
Yeah.
So there you have it. And that was also one of the neatest things about that exhibition, was watching her walk into that and get locked into the plate. Little tiny, she couldn't be more than 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
But just boom, locked in and like.
People, I mean, when you were there watching people look at the things, people who weren't even really interested or, familiar with printmaking and how it all worked, were just like gobsmacked by the copper plates.
And by far the most beautiful thing I make are the plates. Well, they're gorgeous,
they are.
And in there you have that whole world of color. So lucky you folks. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Tru.
Hey, thanks. Off to Huckland.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of Series 2 of Platemark, a one-print episode with Tru and me on Peter Milton's The Train from Munich. It's a favorite of mine. I think it's his most important work, and I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Thanks, as usual, to Tru for being an incredible SME on the history of prints. I couldn't do it without you, and I think we've got something good going. Thanks also to my sound guy, Dan Fury. Thanks, Dan. And also to Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. In addition, thank you goes out to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for sending me sounds from their studios that I put together for the intro and outro of each episode. Images, and there are a lot of them, are over in the show notes. In fact, there are a lot of images that I didn't include in the video version. Bonus images, I guess you could say. So there's a ton in the show notes. I suggest you go over and take a look. platemarkpodcast.com. All right, I think that's it. We'll see you next time.